you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. And now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Happy President's Day, everybody. Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. And I am your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. All right. We're going to talk about January 6th and the footage and stuff like that. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff today, but it's President's Day. So let's go pop this up. I actually meant to get this to you locals earlier this morning, but I couldn't get it with the context. And so here we are now. So Rasmussen did a poll, right? Probably many of you saw it by now, but let's check it out. Last week, we were talking about how the nomination polls started to really take some shape. It's a long way to go, though. I mean, a long way to go before voting starts, folks. Voting will be starting soon for Wisconsin, which we're going to talk about, too. Every special election this season, I got to bring this up. Every special election this season, we're going to have a lot before we have the nominations for the Democrats will have theirs as well, but all eyes will be on the Republican nomination without a doubt, unless something cracks with the Democratic nomination. But the Wisconsin Supreme Court, all right, Kentucky governor, Mississippi governor, we will have maps and results and events, YouTube and local events for it all. If you're a Rumble watcher, you can get that on locals as well. But we will have that for everything this year, all leading up to the nomination where we'll have our own cool delegate tracker. Who's winning? Who's got as many delegates to go? Etc., etc. All right, let's check out this poll from Rasmussen. All right, let's make me non-existent so you can see it as much as possible before we move on to the report about January 6th. And we're going to discuss whether or not this could be considered Kevin McCarthy keeping his promise or not. All right, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Do you consider President's Day to be one of our nation's most important holidays? And actually, for me, let me get up something. I have Rasmussen's history of tracking. I think it's really cool that Rasmussen has been doing this for a long time, so we can check it out, apples to apples, basically. But, every time we have a holiday, the 4th of July, for instance, Rasmussen will ask that question. All right, do you consider President's Day, in this case, to be one of our nation's most important holidays, least important holidays, or somewhere in between? Only 20% said most important, 26% said least important, 48% said somewhere in between, and 6% said they were unsure. All right. Americans consistently rank Christmas as the most important holiday, usually followed by the 4th of July. That's a real indication that the fact that this really is still a faith-believing society, faith-based society, even though that the percentage of believers is most certainly on the decline. Ask which of the 5 most recent presidents was the best, which I think is really interesting. Bill Clinton was 8%. George W. Bush, 9%. If you missed my rant last week, I would cut off my left arm to have Bill Clinton be the president right now. Are you kidding me? Maybe it's because I grew up in the 90s. And if you look at it by age, Bill Clinton did a little bit better with people that are older, but not much. George Bush. I don't know what the hell people are thinking, but for the love of God, George W. Bush was, if not the worst president in modern history, folks, he could be the worst president ever. Ever. He walked into the biggest foreign policy blunder in at least recent history, if not ever, again. And he presided over the preventable collapse of the U.S. economy, even though his Treasury Secretary and the administration, Hank Paulson at the time, knew that it was coming. he didn't have the balls to take on Chris Dodd and Barney Frank. Twice he sent Hank Paulson up there, and twice they smacked him and sent him back. Which led to the very famous, if you remember, the very famous confrontation between Bill O'Reilly and Barney Frank, where Bill O'Reilly went off, screaming at him. Screaming in the 8 o'clock primetime hour. Anyway, I was a little bit stunned by this. And this is somebody who used to call George W. Bush once upon a time my commander-in-chief. He was the commander-in-chief when I was in the Army. I'm a little bit stunned. Anyway, Donald Trump comes out on top and on the bottom. Donald Trump takes the number one spot for which one of the 5 most recent presidents has been the best president. Joe Biden is abysmal. Down there with Bill Clinton. George W. Bush even did better than him. Barack Obama trails Donald Trump 36-30, 8% unsure. But when asked which one of the 5 most recent presidents has been the worst president, Donald Trump and Joe Biden are about even. Trump up by 2, 41-39. Barack Obama came in. That's because he's like too cool for school Obama. No drama Obama, even though that is like a complete construct of the media construct. Remember, we used to talk about that? What's the construct, Rich? It's the world they build for you to live and think in. It's the social order and boundaries of society that they have allowed you to operate and think in. And of course, within those boundaries, the first black president cannot come anywhere near the worst president. However, before Joe Biden, he used to in Quinnipiac all the time. In fact, Ronald Reagan would come out as number 1. Very, very different when you ask the American people versus when you ask these so-called historical scholars, presidential scholars, who are all lefties, all dominated by left-wingers. They put Trump as like the worst ever in history last year. Whereas the American people put him as number 1. Plurality, anyway. He's still ranked as number 1. Boy, I got to tell you, this is why the rematch thing, even though I was talking with Mark over Rasmussen, him and I were discussing, in the advent of vote by mail, is it really possible for, can they just beat anybody on the Republican side with their machine, for legit or not, for better or worse. Can they beat anybody, or is there somebody who can beat them? And it's like, when you look at numbers like this, it's almost incredible that any of this is ever competitive. The Harvard-Harris poll that came out last week, at the end of last week, we went over it briefly, but they dropped some more nuggets since Friday's episode. And, what they're showing in the Harvard-Harris poll is an electoral college stomping of Joe Biden. But Mark and I were talking, and really, whether it's Trump, whether it's Mike Pompeo, whether it's Nikki Haley, whether it's Ron DeSantis, when you look at that unsure, when we go back and we look at 2020 and 2022, it's obvious that at least, and again, I'm saying this as somebody who is obviously open about what I think, happened, they got the lion's share of those unsures. So whoever the Republican nominee is, they're going to have some kind of built-in structural advantage. So you have about 4 in 10 who believe that Joe Biden and Donald Trump are both the worst presidents ever. Donald Trump was able to be successful in 2016 in large part because of how much the country hated Hillary Clinton. That is just true. Joe Biden is getting to the point now where people don't like him either. And I'm going to get this damn fly for the life of me. You might see me swinging wildly at a fly over here. I'm going to get this SOB. He's been in my office for like 3 days. I'm going to kill him. Don't they have a lifespan of 3 days? Shouldn't he be dead by now? Anyway, so there you have it. Very interesting poll. All right. So moving on, though, we'll talk about this more in a bit. And by the way, if you look through the Harvard-Harris poll, why is Trump doing better? Look at by education. And this is the problem I think any Republican nominee is going to have. You may be able to get those people if they come out and they say they're going to vote, folks. if they say they're going to vote, they're going to, okay, I'll vote for the Republican nominee. I'll vote for this one. I'll vote for that one. But the real question is whether or not they'll actually get them out. And without a doubt, the certainty would be higher with Trump. All right. But that means you're going to have some of these other people who say he's the worst president ever and they can't stand him. They're going to come out, right? So I don't know. I think they would come out anyway at this point, because look at 2022. Look at what happened in 2022. Right? They came out where they so happened to come out where they needed to come out. And by the way, before we go, I have to address something. I've been completely misquoted. What I say about what I have said about this Dominion stuff has been misquoted, mischaracterized, whatever you want to say, however you want to put it. You know what? Maybe I'll just answer this now. I had never said ever that I thought that Dominion was secure and safe. I just simply, and Barnes and I both, have warned people about repeating claims that are either not proven yet or disproven about voting machines and systems like Dominion. That being said, as I tweeted out in response to this, there is a reason Dominion failed certification not once but twice in the state of Texas. If you just don't believe those experts, every single one of them from their different they failed every single element of that inspection. Every expert found some problem somewhere. It's true that Texas law is more, I don't want to use the word strict. In order to be certified in Texas, you have to meet a higher standard. That honestly, as I had Matt Brainerd on talking about this in the past, Texas's standard should be closer to everyone else's standard in truth when it comes to these machines, closer to Florida. So I don't want to use the word strict. Everyone should be strict. So just because I've said I'm not criticizing Dominion in that way does not mean that's like some kind of an endorsement of Dominion. Dominion has many problems. It's not me who brought it up. It's not me who even brought it up. I'm simply looking at the results of the inspections that were done by those experts, the different fields, and they all found issues. All right, so, all right, let's look at this, shall we? What to make of this? Is giving 41,000 hours, and let me get some more lighting in here. Is giving 41,000 hours. That was the end of my earphones. Just beat the hell out of them. Is it the same thing? Is giving Tucker Carlson 41,000 hours of the January 6th surveillance footage? Is that the same as the initial promise Kevin McCarthy made when he said, if I am Speaker, I will release the footage from January 6th? I'd like to hear your thoughts on it while we read this article, shall we? Axios, brand new, hours ago. Exclusive, McCarthy gives Tucker Carlson access to trove of January 6th riot tape. What a headline. What a headline. Tucker has been, as you can see right here, that they use for a featured image. Tucker has been an advocate for releasing all of the footage. He has been a critic of the January 6th hearings that were being done under Democrats. He has been a critic of the media's coverage of them, and he has been a critic of the general policy of locking up your political dissidents when they protest. House Speaker, or overcharging people who were allowed in the building, because that's what happened. They were allowed in, and then they were treated as if they were invaders. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has given Fox News' Tucker Carlson exclusive access to 41,000 hours of Capitol surveillance footage from the January 6th riot. McCarthy sources tell me, and by the way, hat tip Mike Allen. This is Mike Allen's. Carlson TV producers were on Capitol Hill last week to begin digging through the trove, which includes multiple camera angles from all over Capitol grounds. Excerpts will begin airing in the coming weeks. Why it matters. Carlson has repeatedly questioned the official accounts of January 6th, downplaying the insurrection as, quote, vandalism. It's not an insurrection. Just stop it. Stop using this word. Nobody tried to overthrow anybody. There was much more violence in the historical record on Capitol Hill. Again, do we have to go down this? A reporter shot and killed a congressman from Kentucky in the East Staircase. A left-wing, all-female, real terrorist group bombed the Senate building. A Bernie-supporting, Hillary-voting, left-wing fanatic duped into believing that Donald Trump was a traitor who colluded with Vladimir Putin to steal the 2016 election, tried to eradicate the Republican conference. In the process, he shot the House Majority Whip and 4 others. Insurrection. Now his shows, Tucker Carlson Tonight on Fox News, and Tucker Carlson Today and Tucker Carlson Originals on the streaming service Fox Nation, have a massive trove of raw material. Carlson told me there was never any legitimate reason for this footage to remain secret. If there was ever a question that's in the public interest to know, it's what actually happened on January 6th. By definition, this video will reveal it. It's impossible for me to understand why any honest person would be bothered by that. That's what Tucker told Mr. Allen. Reality check. The January 6th committee played numerous excerpts of the footage at last year's captivating hearings. See the committee's archive. You got to believe. Reality check. I'm not going to interject now. I'm doing this on purpose. Of course, I have something to say about that kind of mindset, that defer to authority mindset, that put a filter on it mindset. You're too stupid to look at the footage yourself mindset. I'm going to defer right now from interjecting any more than that. Reality check. Reality check for you, dude. Government is not trustworthy. Reality check for you. You know what the leading cause of death was in the 20th century among human beings? Government. Democide. Between the lines, the process with Carlson started in early February, according to a communication between the show and a McCarthy representative that I was shown. So pretty much when McCarthy got the reins, remember the speaker fight over who would be speaker was delayed. It ended up, if you are a proponent of representative government, it ended up with what I believe to be vast improvements over the dictatorial speaker role that we had suffered under as Americans since Newt Gingrich. And we can blame, can blame Pelosi all they want. But the fact of the matter is, Pelosi simply stole the Newt Gingrich model. That's why she was able to be such a powerful speaker. The archive was previously reported to be 14,000 hours. I'm told it's now much more. Well, I thought, wait a minute. What are you talking about? Reality check, Mr. Allen? Reality check, Mr. Allen? You previously believed it to be 14,000 hours because that's what you heard from your freaking committee. Flashback, McCarthy told reporters in Statuary Hall last month that he thinks, quote, the American public should actually see all that happened instead of a report that's written on a political basis. And video beginning at 10:50. You know what? We are going to look at this video. Hold on one second. I'm going to open it, new tab, and we are, in fact, going to do it. Hold on one hot minute. All right, I'm actually at 20 right now, but hold on. I do want to show you this video. Okay, so let's stop this real quick. I'm going to pop this up. I think it's important. If we're going to really gauge McCarthy on, if we're really going to judge him and whether or not this is a fulfillment of his promise, then I think this is important. So let's get to 10:50. I think it starts at, what do you say, 10:50, right? Yep, video starting at 10:50. Let's pop up Mr. McCarthy. And let's listen to him from here. I will shut up. Go.
Yeah, I think the public should see what has happened on day 8. I've watched what Nancy Pelosi did, where she politicized it, where for the first time in the history as a speaker, not allowing the minority to appoint to a committee, to pick and choose. We watched the politicization of this. I think the American public should actually see all what happened instead of a report that's written for a political basis. And
okay, so that actually, let's be fair. Let's let it roll for 20, 30 seconds more.
I think the answer. We're looking through that. I want to be very thoughtful about it, but yes, I'm engaged to do that.
Thank you, sir. On the debt ceiling, can you guarantee?
We don't care about that right now. At least not right at this moment. We don't. All right, so let's go back to this report from Axios. All right, because to me, the central question here, is this giving the footage to Tucker Carlson, is this actually the same thing as letting the American public see? That I think the American public should be able to see all that happened instead of a report that's written on a political basis. Pushing for the release of the footage, Carlson argued on his show last month that Washington has a regime of secrecy and deceit, unquote, which I don't think any of us can deny here or would deny unless you're being unserious with yourself. Carlson, you just heard they had a 2-year investigation in the House, basically, which they referred the former president to the Department of Justice for criminal charges. That was their conclusion. And yet it appears that the archive footage is a lot more substantial in time. I mean, folks, that's almost 4 times the amount. It's over 3 times, almost 4 times the amount of what they previously led us to believe it was. Carlson last year called the attack an, quote, outbreak of mob violence, a forgettably minor outbreak by recent standards. Again, does anybody disagree with that? The reason why they think that January 6th was so much worse than all the other acts of left-wing violence that you've seen in Portland and Seattle and Manhattan, in other parts of New York City and Washington, D.C. I mean, they were turning over cars and burning them in the streets during Trump's inauguration. Kenosha over Kyle Rittenhouse, which was fake. Kyle Rittenhouse was exonerated. He was found not guilty. When finally all the facts came out, facts that were distorted and hidden by both the media and the FBI, who had hours and hours of footage again that exonerated Kyle Rittenhouse, which they refused to release until they absolutely had to. So, of course, we have a regime of secrecy. The reason why they think January 6th is worse, folks, than anything else is because they think they're better than you. Because they view the Capitol building, Capitol Hill, that whole town as their territory, not yours. The people's house is not the people's house. It's their house. The Senate is not a Senate of the upper chamber of your duly elected representatives. It is their chamber. And by extension, any kind of violence that they don't approve of, because let's be honest, they approve of political violence. It just has to be political violence that benefits them. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were literally funding entities to post bail for people who were engaged in widespread acts of political violence before the 2020 election. They do approve of political violence. It just has to be violence that is in the name of their ideology, that is benefiting or advancing their political causes and their pursuit of political power. But when it's an act of violence they don't approve of, when it is not in their interest, and God forbid the blasphemy of it actually occurring on their territory, then it's an insurrection. Because their property, their way of life, their personhood is more sacred to them than yours. Their property is more valuable than yours. That's why they don't care when a lie burns down the businesses of Black communities in Ferguson. They don't care when federal buildings have to be evacuated in Portland and Seattle and Minneapolis. They don't care when businesses that people spent their entire lives establishing and creating into flourishing businesses that support their families and put their kids through college get burned down, get looted, will never recover. They don't care about any of that. Just like they didn't care about destroying your business over COVID. Fauci, he put it real well, actually. And it's economically inconvenient. It's the end of your lifestyle, but to the Washington mind, it's just a little inconvenience. They care more, and that's a really good question. Why does Axios have this scoop? Indeed. So there you have it. They care more about this stuff because it's an attack on them. When it's an attack on you, they don't give a damn. But I'm not getting rid of this page yet because I think it's important to reference a couple of things here. The problem I have with this, and you tell me if you see this the same way. These people have been critical of the Democrat administrative state uniparty playbook, which essentially is the reason why they hate WikiLeaks so much. They hated Julian Assange so much. Mika Brzezinski, great clip Don Smith always used to play on his old show, where Mika Brzezinski really went, on this rant about why she hated Trump's Twitter feed so much and why she thought that Donald Trump should not be able to have the power to go around the media because, and by the way, Chris Cuomo was another one. He did this great when it came to WikiLeaks. You aren't supposed to read WikiLeaks. In fact, it's illegal, he told his viewers, erroneously. We get the information, and then we filter that information and decide what it is you get to see or you don't get to see. This is the point Mr. Allen is missing in his report. But ironically, this is the point some people are missing who are cheering on Kevin McCarthy for doing this. And for as much respect as I have for Tucker Carlson, he should not be the only one who has this footage. His team can siphon through all of the 41,000 hours, just like everyone else should be able to do. But giving him exclusive access to this footage is no different than what corporate media does on the left. And Fox News is corporate media. There will be producers who will have to vet what it is you're going to be allowed to see and what it is you're not going to be allowed to see. On Friday, we went over text messages about how people felt about the Dominion stuff and the Sidney Powell stuff. And, well, do you really... I guess the word is trust. And maybe it's not even a matter of trust. Maybe it's a matter of, should anyone be in that position of ultimate authority? This is evidence that is part of an investigation that was used to refer a former president for criminal charges. Should there be any one media personality or entity that has access to all of this? And is that what Kevin McCarthy said? He said the American public should actually see all that happened instead of a report. Well, whether it's a report that was written by a political, a politically motivated committee in the House of Representatives, or it's a report written by corporate media, primetime show, does it not violate the spirit of what Kevin McCarthy is saying by simply handing over that footage to one entity? It doesn't matter how critical Tucker has been. The American public should be able to see it all for themselves, just as they should have been able to read Hillary Clinton's emails all by themselves and her State Department cables all by themselves. And I'm not saying it was not a violation of certain people's privacy, the DNC emails, but if the media was doing their job, there would never have been a need for Julian Assange or WikiLeaks. He came about because there was a need, there was a need for somebody to do the role that this incestuous media government alliance wouldn't do. They were too incestuous at this point and no longer adversarial. So they would not tell people the context of Hillary Clinton's speeches to Goldman Sachs. They would not tell people what, in fact, was said about screwing Bernie over in the primary in 2016. They were not telling people whether or not Hillary Clinton let Gaddafi get murdered by his own people because she wanted a crown jewel, a foreign policy achievement that she could run on in 2016. People should be able to read for themselves whether our leaders made promises to other leaders that can, in fact, now have a negative impact on foreign policy for years and years to come. Because she let Gaddafi die, Kim Jong-un now has little incentive to give up his ICBM and nuclear program. Ditto the Iranians and anyone else who had a WMD program of any and delivery system program that, would be thinking, if I work with the United States, maybe they'll cut me some slack. Well, you wouldn't have known about that because despite what Chris Cuomo said, he wasn't going to read that to you. He told you it was illegal to go to WikiLeaks because he didn't want you to see it. Just like Mika so honestly admitted, it's our job as the media to filter what it is the American people get to see. And how dare Donald Trump for tweeting directly to them about these issues? No, you're to get handled candidates with pre-approved production news content. This is no better than what they do. The deal Kevin McCarthy struck with Tucker Carlson is no different. It is the same spirit. They just changed the vehicle. They just were able to pick the vehicle, the delivery system for that information on their terms. And they'll argue, but it's Tucker. He's trustworthy. It's Tucker. Yeah, well, George W. Bush was supposed to be trustworthy too when he gave him the Patriot Act. This violates the spirit of all of that. Even if Tucker is trustworthy enough to be the only one with this footage. Should we really be allowing the Republican speaker to set the precedent like this? Because maybe the next guy wouldn't be. You trust Hannity and his team to go through that information? Maybe next time he'll give it to Hannity. I don't. I don't trust Sean Hannity to give everybody the full story. So while I have much more faith in Tucker to do so, I mean, this is nuts. And I think you meant reach around, right? He did accept it. That's why we call him Bend Over Bernie here. He had all the information at his fingertips and he didn't do it. And because he didn't wise up, what happened to him in 2020? They screwed him again. Right from the jump in Iowa. He wins the Iowa caucus. They beat him out of it by misallocating state delegate equivalents. Take his momentum away before New Hampshire. He barely wins that. They rob him of momentum. They rob him of fundraising opportunities. They artificially prop up Pete Buttigieg. Right. This is the thing. Bill Brent said, it's all theater. Right. And if you allow the Republican speaker to set this kind of precedent, well, we're just going to give it to somebody we know and we trust. No, that's not what he said. This was supposed to be for all of us to go through. And look, I don't care. I wouldn't even have done probably a show. I would have done a show maybe mentioning the work some other people do. It's not our shtick here. Our shtick is public opinion, why people believe the things they do, and what do they believe. So maybe we would have plucked a couple of segments out here and there that we thought would have been relevant to something like that. But absolutely, it's somebody else's domain to go through all that footage. It's not what we do. And I would have let them do that just fine. I guarantee you would see things that you're just not going to see now. You're not. And I think that's the tragedy here. That is, in fact, the tragedy. All right, so let me see if I can get this. Let me see. Another one of our top stories that we've been following here. Looks like Trump is headed to Ohio. Looks like Donald Trump, the former president, is going to East Palestine, Ohio, while the current president will be hopping on over to Ukraine. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at some stuff here. Just moments, by the way, after Trump said that he was going to go to East Palestine, FEMA did an about face yesterday and reverse their decision on whether or not to send additional federal aid. Don't you find that a little bit? Again, don't you find that a little bit funny? There are never any coincidences in government, folks. There's just not. In government and politics, it's rarely. And this is not one. There is actually something I wanted to show you. We were talking in the book club yesterday. All right. And I wanted to read you something from CD Media, who was a sponsor for several of our polls. And they should feel ecstatic about their track record because the polling we did for them was quite accurate, even though it wasn't, we didn't have a lot of finals for them. But I mean, Pennsylvania was like real close. When we did that, it was the one for locals that showed the change for Oz. But for them, they got the best of it. They got the better end of it. That's for sure. But for those who don't know, Todd Wood has been, he's the founder of CD Media and all of their, whatever you want to call them, subsidiaries. They're like an aspiring wire service. So you have CD Media, which is the parent company, and you have Zionism, which covers the Israel and the Middle East. Then you have Tsarism, which covers basically all of the entities that used to be in the former Soviet Union. All right. And Belarus would be one of them. All right. So, and of course, they have been all over. He's been, speaking of Tucker, Todd has been quite a bit on Tucker to talk about things that, again, corporate media will never tell you, to include Fox News outside of Tucker, and I'll give him that. The skimping that's been going on, the skim of foreign aid that's been going on, the scam that is Ukraine aid, and making all of these oligarchs rich, while it's not really doing anything for you. So I thought this was, it is earlier in the month, but I thought because there's so many people asking about this that we would go over this together. All right. So what I like about it is they're showing you different claims by different media outlets and admitting, while it is difficult to get accurate numbers, there's certain people that have pretty much at this point proven themselves to be not credible. And, both sides are going to lie. All right. I mean, they're going to be pro-Western sources that are going to exaggerate Russian casualties and minimize Ukrainian casualties. Same will be true on the Russian point of view of this. You'll have sources that are going to minimize Russian casualties and, of course, make the Ukrainian casualties sound worse than potentially they are. All right. So on February 24, 2022, because I really do want to read this, I think it's important. After months of troops amassing on Ukraine's borders and failed peace talks, and again, by the way, like I said, Biden's going to Ukraine. You got to be kidding me. We have what essentially is the biggest disaster in our interior in recent memory, perhaps since Katrina. We don't even know the extent to what could have happened there. And nobody gives a damn but Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, by the way, who has already endorsed Donald Trump for president in 2024.
J.D. Vance is super cool.
J.D. Vance is most definitely living up to my expectations, but I'm usually a really good judge of character in the political sphere, and Vance is the real deal. He really is. On February 24, 2024, after months of troops amassing on Ukraine's border and failed peace talks, Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia's military mobilized 150,000 troops in a, quote, special military operation, unquote, in Ukraine, the largest battle in Europe since World War II. It has dominated media headlines for the last year. Almost a year later, we can look back and ask with some perspective, where do we stand? Who is winning this war? Who is losing? What are the objectives on each side? What's the real narrative versus the mainstream media version? The amount of media disinformation on this topic has reached completely surreal levels. When subject to a little scrutiny, the narrative being force-fed to the public completely falls apart. We will go through the facts on a number of fronts and show what's actually happening. And by the way, Todd actually had to escape Ukraine during the advent of the conflict. And we're going to dig a little deep. We're going to dig in deeply on the real objectives on all sides. Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot this. Hold on, folks. I got to get myself prepared here for. Oops. Yeah, I really did. Okay. And we're going to dig in deeply on the real objectives on all sides. The U.S. national security states a reason to be involved, Russia's goals, and Zelensky's goal, money. In later pieces, we will look more closely at the true theater of this conflict. It's more of an economic than military one. Along with Russia's partners, China and Iran, it will eventually encompass several geographic hotspots. The initial moves. The Russian advance the first few weeks of the war saw them sending units everywhere to Kiev, Kharkiv, and numerous points in the south. David, I see you binging me. If you're watching right now, you're more than welcome to jump on and talk about it because I think you're making some really good points right now at referring to the footage. Laura, you can send him an invite if he wants to come on. I think his input would be valuable here. What David Giglio is trying to say is that whether you like Tucker or not, the Murdochs are in on Stop Trump in 2024. They are all over it. They're behind it. They are going to bury. How much are they going to let? At the end of the day, Tucker works for them. How much are they going to let you see when they want Trump gone? They were supportive of this committee, this farce of a committee. They supported it. They called it an insurrection. Very few people stood up and said, what are you talking about? Donald Trump tweeted to be peaceful. He said in his speech, be peaceful. They didn't mention any of that. The divisions everywhere in Ukraine soon withdrew and turned home, and the fighting concentrated on the south, where most of the Ukraine military was concentrated. This is an assessed control of terrain in Ukraine and main Russian maneuver axis as of March 22nd, 2022. Take note of where things were at this point. This is from the Institute for the Study of War, okay? And you can see here in the beginning, there were offensives all the way as far as Kiev, all right? But, you have ethnic Russian population areas. All right, so just try to take a mental picture of that in your head. Assessed Russian advances in Ukraine are dotted. Assessed Russian-controlled Ukraine territory as solid. Claimed Russian control over Ukraine territory, such as in Kherson and parts of Mariupol, are yellow with red dots. Claimed Ukrainian counteroffenses are blue with blue dots. And observed Ukraine protest against Russian occupation is solid blue, since I saw parts over here of Eastern. And Ukrainian highways are obviously on the solid black lines. Okay, so let's move on in. Why did Russia do these moves initially and later unwind them? Was this the plan or a failure? We think that the initial moves were a combination of three factors. First, in 2014, Russia had attacked Ukraine to annex Crimea. Ukraine's military folded in a week, and Russia soon annexed all of Crimea. Russia surely had this memory of a weak armed force that would quickly fold in mind. The beefed-up, NATO-supported forces of Ukraine surely took them by surprise. See, this is why I'm saying that CD is being very honest here. There is no doubt that while Putin is not launching some kind of full offensive invasion the way he could, he's not scorched earth in this puppy, there is the truth to this idea, and even his generals told him that, look at what happened in 14, we could apply minimal pressure and the army's probably going to fold. So in the beginning, they did not perform. The Russian troops did not perform as they expected because the Ukrainian forces mounted a stronger resistance. Secondly, surely some of these broad initial moves was to spread Ukraine thin, so they did not know where the real attack was coming from. That's textbook Russia. As it turned out, the main conflict was focused on the Donbass and Luhansk, while the other areas were largely ignored. Finally, it seems that Russia's limited forces were partly designed to strike a blow against Ukraine in an effort to get a strong, immediate peace deal. Ukrainian leaders rejected a February pre-invasion deal. Another one was worked out in April of 2022 and then vetoed by the US and the UK at the last minute. Okay, this is worth repeating. Zelensky was ready to come to the table on multiple occasions as early as April 2022. The US did not allow him to do it. And the UK, the little, I don't even know how to characterize the UK at this point. I really don't. I wouldn't say they're the little petting dog like they were in the times of Tony Blair, but this is embarrassing. It appears Russia had a smart strategy in the beginning, but it was overruled by Western powers who think Russia can be defeated. And by the way, before we go any further, do you know what the U.S. wants them to do now? Throw all caution to the wind, accept significant casualties by launching an offensive in Crimea. I kid you not. They want Ukraine to attack the Russians in Crimea, as if Putin wouldn't defend Crimea with a lot more force than he has used in his offensives in places like Kiev. But even the Ukrainians have said, we're going to lose a lot of people. Biden and the West are like, well, so what? You need a win. You need a media win. So go spill a ton of blood so we can get a media win. Otherwise, it's getting a little bit hard for us to continue to write checks. Who is actually winning? Despite all the media narratives out there, we must make it very clear. Ukraine is losing this war badly. In terms of territory, casualties, internal pressures, etc., Ukraine is on its back foot. And this is only after the initial 10 months with 150,000 to 200,000 Russian troops in the field and limited bombardment. And that is true. And by the way, Russia doesn't send their, how could I put this? In some of their more risky endeavors, they'll send, I don't know how to characterize them. People who are given second chances in life, go fight, and then maybe you can win your good name and your criminal record back. There's a lot of that, and they have mercs. So they're not going to immediately commit. They're more trained and seasoned forces, especially in the beginning. They didn't, because I don't think they felt like they had to use them. As Russia continues to put more soldiers into the country and bring more force to bear on crucial infrastructure, the reality will become unavoidable. The Institute for the Study of War, who, by the way, if you know who's behind it, these are not people who are like America firsters, okay? The Institute for the Study of War has daily updates on the territory of the Ukraine war. It's quite clear. Russia's territory under control has greatly expanded since the start of the invasion. It has gained several provinces worth of territory and controls between 20 to 25% of Ukraine now. The blue territory around Kherson and Kharkiv seems not to be from Ukrainian military victories, but instead tactical withdrawals by Russia. So this isn't area they took back, folks, to the east and south of Kharkiv and north of Kherson. This is area where the Russians simply pulled back in an effort to beef up the area in Eastern Europe where Barnes and I have showed you on numerous occasions. There are three things there that they want. Industry, being shale deposits, the breadbasket, production, goods producing infrastructure, ethnic Russians, that's another biggie, who want to be part, I hate to tell everybody, of Russia. They identify as Russian. And of course, the bulwark itself. The blue territory around Kherson and Kharkiv, right? Blah, 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 right. So here it is again. So you can see the change since the initial, this is as of February 4th, 2023. You can see the change since the initial start of the conflict in March of 2022. Big difference. Big difference. All right. Despite the large Russian territorial advantage, the media and the Zelensky regime continue to push the narrative that the war will be won in a few months. That is, a full capture of all that Russian territory by summer. Of course, they just need massive amounts of NATO weapons and aid in order to guarantee the outcome. More on this grift in a future piece. They have done tremendous work on this. Naming names and everything. Ukraine sees year of victory, but Russia has other plans. Liz Sly at the Washington Post, which was reprinted by the Atlantic. Time is on Ukraine's side, not Russia's. The Ukrainians will win if they keep getting better weapons, by Philip Space and O'Brien. Folks, there's something called latent power. Again, we're reading The Tragedy of Great Power Politics by John Mearsheimer. He does a great job talking about latent potential, military power. What's the difference, right? Mobilization. A nation state has to be, has to have a high degree of mobilization in order to continue. The idea that you could bloodlet Russia, who has committed such a small fraction of their total capabilities, whereas Ukraine may seriously be 60% deficient already at this point. The idea they could do this even with NATO aid. The problem is the bodies, and this is what Ukraine leaders have to be thinking about when the West, like Biden and others, tell them to launch an offensive against the Crimea. Even if they were to launch this massive offensive and temporarily gain the Crimea from Russia, they will never be able to hold it. The amount of bodies that it's going to take for them to get that territory, it's like, after you have it, then what? Another perfect example of the dog who caught the bus. So now what? How would they hold it? When all read about the massive numbers of NATO weapons and aid going to Ukraine, we all read, but probably more important is that NATO leadership and intelligence is almost completely running this war now. There has been no official pronouncement of this yet, but reading between the lines of the official narrative leaves no doubt, which Joe Kent and I were talking about 2 weeks ago on this show. At some point, Putin will be justified to say, NATO has declared war on me. They're running this show. They're sending them tanks. Next up, what? Planes? Who is criticizing Elon Musk for not being willing to, give them infinite support from Starlink and others? It's not Elon Musk's fault that a lot of that got destroyed. If anything, he's lost out on this. So he's just supposed to keep rebuilding Ukraine's infrastructure so they can continue to use Starlink? Or those, I want to say it's not traditional infrastructure, but NATO attacked him for it. The US attacked him for it. The UK attacked him for it. David Petraeus, the de facto U.S. government spokesman, describes the enormous amount of coordination the U.S. is undertaking, quote, behind the scenes in Ukraine, which, quote again, has maybe not been fully visible, unquote, to the public, including some of the closest allies, UK, with boots on the ground. Our friends in Britain. Were you aware of that? And I would love to show that video by David Petraeus that Michael Tracy put up, but it was a while ago. Look at the date, October 5th, 2022. Before Christmas, before Halloween. It's not new. But there remains two flies in the ointment to the Ukraine is winning narrative. The first is that this war has been fought largely at close distances, where Russia has an overwhelming advantage in artillery fire. It ranges from anywhere of 5-1 to 12-1, depending on the location and what source you read. This would account for a large part of Russia's advantage in inflicting casualties. In addition, the Western Ukraine do not produce enough artillery rounds to support this rate long term. From the New York Times, of all places, in October. Last summer, in the Donbass region, the Ukrainians were firing 6,000 to 7,000 artillery rounds each day, a senior NATO official said. The Russians were firing 40 to 50,000 rounds per day. By comparison, the United States only produces 15,000 rounds each month. So in order to continue to support Ukraine like this, which we talked about in the book club on Locals yesterday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, every Sunday on Locals, for local supporters, peoplespundit.locals.com, we would have to be reducing our own war mobilization capability and our own inventories to continue to support Ukraine like this. So we're actually reducing our ability to defend ourselves by supporting Ukraine. The other challenge to the official narrative has been the recent fighting centered around Bakhmut, the Green Circle, and I'm going to butcher this, Zaporizhzhia. The fighting has seen tremendous efforts by Ukraine as it has decided to hold those locations at all costs. And from speaking, a lot of this is a public relations battle. They cannot lose Bakhmut. They can't. If they did, it would be a big defeat, even hard for Western media to be able to cover up. Recent information in the last week seems to indicate the Russians have encircled Bakhmut and are about to capture the big city. Blogger Big Surge claiming that publicly available sources indicate the Ukrainians committed 34 brigades to Bakhmut. That's between 110 to 170,000 soldiers for one town. But as those units have come into artillery range and are slowly surrounded, it seems Ukraine is suffering casualties across a host of units. The fighting around Bakhmut looks like a desperate effort to hold the line. It is. So much so that even regime outlet the Washington Post had to concede it was a risky endeavor. Bloody Bakhmut siege poses risk for Ukraine. Kiev must balance its defense of the city, weighted with symbolism, with preparations for a counteroffensive. See, here's the Washington Post trying to do the business of the Biden administration, the Biden regime. Get on the offensive. They don't care how many Ukrainians will die trying to take Crimea. They don't give a rat's ass. German intelligence, as reported by Der Spiegel, estimated that the Ukrainians were losing 50 to 1,000 soldiers per day in Bakhmut. And by the way, that was more than a month ago. Oh, no, it was about a month ago, which is a huge rate of attrition, even considering the number of soldiers present. They also said it was a crucial point in the Ukraine lines and likely to fall soon. With the very likely capture of, and did it fall already? I think it may be all but lost. With the very likely capture of Bakhmut in February and a withdrawal of Ukrainian troops to a new defensive line, the media will get more desperate. And that's why am I reading you this right now? Again, Trump's going to Ohio to make sure we haven't poisoned the people of East Palestine for a generation, and Joe Biden is going to Eastern Europe. Or they will concoct a new narrative, but all it does is temporarily obfuscate the Russian military's methodological progress, when we have been told forever that Ukraine is resisting well and can win this war in a matter of months. Now on to the topic of total casualties, which is great here. And Ian, I was talking to you about this yesterday. You may want to check this out. For obvious reasons, the official Ukrainian and Russian data should be ignored, but we should also entirely discount the mainstream media figures as propaganda as well. The New York Times and the Daily Mail cited U.S. officials that the Russians have lost almost 200,000 dead after losses of 500 per day in Bakhmut for several weeks. El Paso reports between January 6th and 31st, the Ukrainian High Command claims 17,000 Russian troops lost their lives in the battle, a figure that represents almost double the monthly average reported by Kiev throughout 2022. First off, any of these outcomes are almost mathematically impossible. Russia initially deployed 150,000 troops into Ukraine, even with rotations. And why is CD talking like this? All right, because their owner and many of the people working for it have actually served in a military. And in Todd's case, he was a pilot for SARS, for those of you who know what that is, a special operations aviation. Those are the guys who pick up Green Berets. Those are the guys who pick up Navy SEALs. Even with rotations, that would mean that essentially 90% or more of the troops deployed to the front lines have been killed or injured. Folks, that's propaganda. Secondly, there is the practical element of their advance. The army continues to advance, gain territory, and not suffer mass surrenders, desertions, collapses of morale, or prisoners captured. We challenge you to name an army in history that suffered 80 or 90% casualty rate, yet was also winning and holding new ground. It's total bull. It's total BS. So what are the real casualty numbers for both Russia and Ukraine? We have three good estimates from credible sources. And again, remember, this is a couple weeks old, all right? The head of the European Commission, in a speech in November, and this is interesting, let slip some distributing numbers from official sources. According to her sources, Ukrainian armed forces, after 8 months of conflict, had suffered 100,000 killed in action. She later got a call that disclosing that information was confidential, and she scrubbed it from the official speech on the website. If that was the number in November, we can extrapolate that it's 130 to 140,000 now. Mention of 100,000 Ukraine soldiers killed during the war removed from the address of the head of the European Commission. So if you don't think, folks, that these people push propaganda more than they push truth, there's a great example for you. That's a pretty big fact to hide, to scrub. And whether or not it's a fact or not, estimate, whatever you want to call it. It's a pretty serious topic to hide from you. At the beginning of her address, von der Leyen, if I said that correctly, said that Russia's invasion of Ukraine brought, all these updates. Come on now. Give me this update. God, these people, these conservative, talk people, I don't know how I keep ending up on your list, but no matter how much I unsubscribe, they don't go away. There's still 50 of them in my email inbox every day. It's driving me nuts. This is getting to the point of ridiculous. Todd Starnes, Ben Shapiro, and others. I don't even know how did I end up on these lists? Anyway, I said that the Russia's invasion of Ukraine brought death, devastation, and untold suffering, and that it was estimated that over 20,000 civilians and 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died in Ukraine to date. That is her direct quote. Direct quote. Okay? Boom, 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 boom. This thing is getting just totally in my way. Sorry about this, guys. Hold on one second. Okay. And here it is. This is the direct quote. That was removed. However, later the text of von der Leyen's statement on the European Commission's website has been edited and published without data on casualties, neither among civilians nor among the military. BBC estimated, with open source data, around 10,000 deaths in the first 9 months of the war. Later in the article, they specify that, quote, BBC notes that, by the most conservative estimates, the real number of Russian soldiers killed in Ukraine may exceed 20,000, and the total number of irretrievable losses could be as high as 90,000. Furthermore, the war has gone on for another 2 months, so let's make that 20,000, now 40,000, or 50,000 to be safe on the Russian side. BBC and Mendoza confirm 10,000 Russian soldiers dead in Ukraine. Colonel Douglas McGregor has aggregated numbers and gets to a number of 122,000 killed in action on the Ukraine side, with 30 to 35,000 presumed dead on top of that. He estimated 17 to 22,000 dead on the Russian side and approximately twice that number wounded. Putting this all together, if we had to give final numbers, we would say the best guess is roughly 150,000 Ukrainians dead and 40 to 50,000 Russian soldiers dead. Russia has a 3-to-1 kill advantage thus far in the war. They will soon have an absolute numerical advantage in forces present in Ukraine. The math does not look good for Ukrainian casualties from here. It's not only that. Again, let's go back to what a nation state needs to continue on in conflict. They don't have the, like Mearsheimer says, for every neck there are 2 hands to squeeze it. They don't have the latent power. They don't have the wealth of, their population. They just don't have it, which is something the U.S. should be more concerned about, looking to China instead of going over to Ukraine and literally giving up our ability to defend ourselves against another great power who aspires to turn the international system into a global feudal system. That should be the top concern for whoever runs this country and their so-called generals, not how Ukraine can be saved at this point. Nikki Haley and her Mists of Empire. They're going to go after, if we don't stop them in Ukraine, they're going to be, Poland will be next. That is such a load of crap. And if Poland believed it, then Poland would be in the war right now. Believe me. Because that is how the real world really works. National security state's objective with Russia. While it could take up its own article, the goal of the U.S. national security state's use of Ukraine has been obvious for years. Its goal is to have a long proxy war which weakens and eventually breaks Russia. It's called bloodletting. And if you plan it and goad the power into it, it's called baiting and bleeding. And in the process, but we didn't do that. Let's be honest, we didn't do that. And how do we know that to be the case? Because when who they're smearing now, Seymour Hersh, who just a month ago, if you would have read his wiki page, he was like a famed left-wing journalist. Everyone loves him. He's so credible. Oh my God, he's the only one who told you the truth about WMDs in Iraq when everybody else from the Atlantic to the New York Times was publishing bullcrap. And Seymour Hersh used to work at the New York Times. He was the lone dissenting voice saying that there was no connection between Al-Qaeda and Iraq, and that WMDs are not being funneled from Saddam Hussein to Al-Qaeda. And now if you look at his wiki page, they've already changed it since the Nord Stream 2 report came out. He's a conspiracy theorist, they put. NATO expansion toward Russia has been occurring since the 1990s. Absolutely. Major thinkers like George Kennan. Oh, I have to say this. And in the process, all of this benefits the U.S. military, suppliers, and contractors. NATO expansion, which they should have said overexpansion or even aggression. NATO aggression would have been the more academically accurate term to use. Toward Russia has been occurring since the late 1990s. Major thinkers like George Kennan, he is the architect of the Cold War containment policy. George Kennan is the father and the author of the Long Telegraph. And John Mearsheimer, who I was just telling you about, warned that this would lead to an authoritarian regime in Russia and an eventual war over Ukraine. Both were right, but they were ignored as the regime continued to push to surround and destabilize Russia. The RAND Corp, a think tank, joined at the hip with the Pentagon in 2019, published an extensive piece on how to overextend and exhaust Russia. They examined a host of measures, including arming Ukraine, placing NATO forces in Ukraine and Europe. Not coincidentally, most of these proposed measures became U.S. policy in subsequent years. Here's something that RAND Corp, though, and others did not take into consideration. If you were not missing, if you did miss, is what I'm trying to say here. Because, I mean, what's so funny is that they're so busy pumping you with this propaganda and BS, you miss the actual important stuff. All right, which was, once again, another embarrassment of the U.S. administration at the hands of China. And this time, Wang Yi told Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, basically to go pound sand. He said, you are not in a position to tell us what we can or cannot do to help Russia. We're buddies with Russia now. That is what he basically said. He laid out. The force is strong between us now, all because of you. It's your fault, actually. But we have to thank you for blossoming such a beautiful friendship between the two of us. And he told Blinken, you're not in a position to demand anything. Shut up and sit down. The second major embarrassment to Tony Blinken and to the entire United States. So what they did not calculate was how much China may actually just help Russia. We really blew this big time. All right, we're almost to the end here. I'm going to take a break, though, first, okay? I think it's important to take a break first. And we're going to wrap it up. I really do think that it is super, super important for you guys to hear all of this. And I think that CD is one of the most fair, even though a lot of their critics will label them being like too pro-Russia. Does it sound like they're trying to cover for Russia? No. They're telling you both sides lie. And here's what's likely to be the truth. At the end of the day, we can look at some things that are not in dispute. Who controls what territory? What has the change been over the last 10 to 11 months? Does that support the claims either side are making? And what does that really tell us about the state of things? Biden's going to go over there and he's going to try to get the Ukrainians to basically commit an act of mass suicide. That's what he's going to do. Anyway, let's God, this stuff pisses me off. When it comes to like foreign policy, folks, all attempt to be impartial goes out the window with me. I'm just being honest. War is horrible. And it's so funny that those who don't fight them are the ones who seem to like be so eager to start them. Let's talk about Field of Greens now. All right. Brickhouse Nutrition. Junk science. That's what the doctor called many of the fruit and vegetables supplements that we've tried in the past. Junk science because they use extracts and common produce department fruits and vegetables with few health benefits. I take Field of Greens because it's the whole organic fruit and vegetable, not a watered down supplement. And it's backed by that better health promise. Each ingredient in Field of Greens was scientifically chosen to support vital organs like your lungs, heart, kidney health. Others support my immune system, my blood pressure, metabolism, and healthy weight loss. I don't eat as healthy as I should to any of us, really. We need 5 healthy servings of fruit and vegetables a day. But that's why I take Field of Greens. Like me, you'll probably look and feel healthier fast. With me, it was immediate, folks. Everyone's experience is different. I have way more energy, but your best proof will be the next checkup you go to your doctor when they tell you whatever you're doing, it's working. Keep it up. Let's get started. Let's get you started with 15% off. Visit fieldofgreens.com. Use the promo code TPP for the People's Pundit. That's promo code TPP at fieldofgreens.com. All right. Again, always send me your feedback. I love to hear it. I get nothing but positive feedback right now. It's a staple for us. In fact, Laura, we gotta get more. I'm almost out. All right. Next up, Jam and Bean. I'm so glad so many of you, we actually got feedback from them. So we love that you guys support those who support us, and this is a Patriot-owned company right here. Real quick, I just want to tell a story for those who've never heard it before. When I was really young, like 18, maybe, something like that, I got an opportunity to work at this guy who was a bean import company, and he was a roaster. And I really realized at that point that roasting coffee is like an art form, right? And because of that experience, you look at a bean that you'll get from Starbucks in a bag that you take home to grind up and put in your French press or whatever you use. It's crap. It's garbage. It's pulverized. It's over roasted, and it's flavored because the roasting process is so poor. When K-Pods, I drink for convenience, right? But I like dark roast, but in the middle of the day, especially once in a while, I like to have a nice full-bodied medium. Good luck with that if you're drinking K-Pods. Buy them at the store, break them open, and you'll see a so-called medium roast from Starbucks in a K-Pod is nothing more than a dark roast that they gave you less of, and they stuffed the rest of the K-Pod with some crazy foam-looking substance that God knows was doing God knows what to your stomach after it runs through the Keurig. No thank you. That's why I want you to go to jamandbean.com, talk about an artist. Whether you're getting a bag of coffee, the beans, and you're going to grind them yourself, or you want convenience in the K-Cup, Jam and Bean is the way to go. This is the first and only full-bodied medium roast K-Pod I have ever tasted. And when you know the difference. Without getting into the weeds on the technology, but it wasn't easy. All right. Also, as you can see behind me, I ate the dill live on Friday. As soon as the show was over, I ate the rest of the bag. The gourmet popcorn is just tremendous. Use promo code TPP at checkout, folks, and get 10% off your order at Jam and Bean. Again, they have many different flavors depending on what you like. You pick and choose what you like, but there's something there for everybody. The tea is also delicious if you're a tea drinker. All natural. When you get a sour cream and chive, for instance, like I got right behind me right now, when you have a sour cream and chive, you're going to taste that bag and you're going to realize that's all natural ingredients. That is not some again, processed nonsense. It's delicious. Jamandbean.com, JAMN bean.com. Use the promo code TPP at checkout. All right. Let's go back here to let's go ahead and wrap this up so we can get on with what I wanted to show you. All right. So the war in Ukraine after 1 year, where are we? Where do we stand? All right. The Atlantic Council, another doozy. All right. The Atlantic Council, the Center for a New American Security, CNAS, and others all bang the drum about the dangers of Russian expansion and the importance of Ukraine. You can watch the Helsinki Commission's recommendation to Congress this past summer to decolonize Russia. That's rich, coming from anybody in the West, by splitting it up into multiple countries. And there it is right there. No joke, decolonizing Russia. And actually, guys, I'm going to give you this link. I meant to do it before. YouTube coming your way. You were first up. You were just first one. Locals coming your way. Getter coming your way. Rumble coming your way. Here it is. I highly, highly recommend that you all do, in fact, go not only read this article, but also go and click on those links that they're showing you right here. I think you'll be astonished at the hubris of the people who are putting forward these plans. This plan it's not new. It really started to take root after the fall of the Soviet Union. And we came to what these idiots really believed would be the end of history. Like as if nation states weren't going to engage in security competition anymore, and the U.S. would be a global hegemon for the rest of like the foreseeable timeline of human history. And we'll just use the primacy of U.S. power to make everyone, we can decolonize everyone we don't agree with and implement our own little democratic colony everywhere, and nobody will war with each other anymore. Of course, that's a pipe dream. We're never going to stand around the campfire holding hands singing Kumbaya at the UN or whatever. That's not how the international system works. Nation states engage in security competition. This plan's been around since the 90s. The fall of the Soviet Union was not enough. Russia now has to be made a vassal state or a divided nation. It's right there. Read it yourself. You'll see it for yourself. So clearly, the U.S. regime only views Ukraine as a way to expand NATO influence and to destabilize Russia. Eventually, they'd like to see Russia split up, either by regime change, a bankruptcy, or an extension of ethnic conflicts like those in Ukraine. Like we saw the U.S., NATO, and NATO member nations in the West support against the people of the Donbass for 8 years. Your money was being used to wage a mini genocide. So clearly, the U.S. regime doesn't care about pushing them to do things that they may not be capable of achieving, like, for instance, assaults on Crimea. The U.S. cares little about the regime in Ukraine, little about the Ukrainian people, and has ignored Russia's warnings on NATO and military expansion for 2 decades. They have also ignored their own experts. This new generation of so-called Russian experts are nobodies. They are not experts in anything. They are a mediocre, leftover class who couldn't make it in academia, so instead they go to the State Department and the Defense Department in Washington, D.C., where you don't actually have to defend your views with sound analysis or an argument that holds up against scrutiny against from your peers and others. This is a full-on play to take out one of the 2 potential rivals in Eurasia. Unfortunately for the U.S., its strategy has backfired and has only pushed all of its Eurasian rivals closer together. Again, Wang Yi just said yesterday or 2 days ago, Tony, pound sand. You made China closer to Russia than ever before, and we will do what we want to do. And if we want to help Russia beat back NATO expansion, we will do it. Kiss our commie, you know what's. And they're totally in a position to do it. Because whatever they do to help Russia, rest assured, China would not be willing to sacrifice their own ability to defend themselves, military readiness, mobilization. But they haven't been dumb like we have. They haven't expended blood and treasure unnecessarily. %9% for George W. Bush. We haven't recovered from George W. Bush yet, even with Trump's buildup. Why? Because we were so badly in debt. Eventually, it's cost-benefit analysis. We were so badly in need of a military upgrade, and our system isn't like the Chinese system. Our system, like he wrote before, like the CD Media said before, our system is to benefit the Rand corporations, to benefit the Miters, to benefit the Boeings, to benefit the Northrop Grummons, to benefit all the people who live in like Bel Air, Maryland, and Northern Virginia, and Colorado. It is not an efficient system. $200 for a hammer. Russia's objectives. Russia's aversion to NATO expansion and to long-range missiles being in Ukraine and in range of Russian territory is well known. Even Barack Obama understood that. I'll transmit this to Vladimir Medvedev told Obama. You remember that they were talking about the missile systems. And also, and Crimea, frankly. When I get reelected, we'll make sure the missiles don't go back in there. And then also, I'll step back. You could take Crimea. I'll transmit this to Vladimir. And also well understood, frankly, most nations would understandably be wary if a strategic rival put ballistic missiles 100 miles from your border. Would China countenance missiles on its border in Manchuria or Mongolia from the US or UK? Would Saudi Arabia tolerate Iranian missiles on its Yemeni border? Actually, they did not, and they fought a war over it. Would the US tolerate Chinese missiles based in Monterrey or Juarez, Mexico? It didn't allow Soviet missiles in Cuba. It almost started a nuclear war over them. Beyond that strategic concern, which seemed to have been addressed with the Minsk II Accords in 2014, Russia added 3 more with the invasion of Ukraine. The first is the demilitarization of Ukraine. It's now not enough for the regime in Ukraine to declare themselves neutral or not in joining NATO. They are too much of a threat having any military power and have to see their military reduced to a bare defense force similar to Japan and Germany after World War II. Secondly, Russia is pushing for what they call the denazification of Ukraine. This is a complex topic, but suffice to say that the last 10 years has seen many far-right and explicitly neo-Nazi leaders hold posts in the parliament and government of Ukraine. In addition, there is a substantial presence of these people in the military, with a couple of whole battalions made up of SS tattoo-toting real Nazis. Google away your photo evidence. These people share the Nazi ideology of removing the ethnic Russians from their land to make way for more, quote, living space, unquote, for the ethnic Ukrainians. Barnes and I have been over this on What Are the Odds so many times, it's unbelievable that we have to repeat it. The Russians view this as a major reason for the atrocities in the Donbass, and only eliminating these elements from the regime can prevent further civilian losses. Beyond that, the Russian government has now concluded that Zelensky is an unreliable negotiator. They think he is not acting in good faith and is a full-on NATO puppet. They have added that only a full regime change in Ukraine will be acceptable in order to protect all people of Ukraine and to have lasting peace. If the Russians win, we may see Zelensky face trial or be executed for what Russia sees as his many crimes. This is what the corner Zelensky backed himself into. Russia has a larger agenda in full strategic cooperation with China and Iran, one we obviously share a border with, that extends well beyond Ukraine. It also has just as much, if not more, of an economic dimension to it than a military one. We will cover that in a separate piece, but Barnes and I have talked about this as well. Is a peace deal possible? Russia has sought to insulate itself from Western economies so that when they do what Joe Biden said would cripple their currency and their economy, it didn't. It did, however, give a massive hit to the US dollar. It did, however, put the power and the strength of the petrodollar in doubt. It did send other people flying away from it as the standard. But it didn't hurt Russia at all. For all the reasons Barnes and I went over in that episode of What Are the Odds? Why these sanctions won't do shit to Russia. Is a peace deal possible? Before the war in early February 2022, there was a peace deal shepherded by President Macron of France. They agreed to largely the same terms as the Minsk II peace accords with a few small modifications. The Russians said yes, but the Ukrainians rejected it, and the two countries went to war a week later. In April, after multiple drafts with President Erdogan and the two sides appeared to have reached at least a ceasefire. Then UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson urged Zelensky to turn it down and keep fighting. Since then, the two countries have been at loggerheads. Ukraine will only agree to peace with full Russian withdrawals from occupied territory. The Russians have passed referendums and annexed those provinces. They view their return as a non-starter. That's not happening. Not without force. A third party, the U.S. administration, has been changing its tune as of late. They have gone from 100% support of Zelensky's stance to proposing a third way. Perhaps they see the upcoming Russian offensive. Perhaps they are losing faith in the Ukraine regime. Or perhaps they just have come to realize that Russia is not leaving the territory they currently occupy in Ukraine. But lately, both CIA Director Burns, also the former ambassador to Russia from 2005 to 2008, and Secretary of State Blinken have floated peace deals to the Russians that involve some recognition of the status quo. As of now, the Russians have not agreed to anything, but at least the U.S. is trying to have some sort of realistic discussion, unlike Ukraine. The next stages. What's going to happen next in this ugly conflict? Peace deals falling apart and will continue to do so as long as Zelensky, his regime is in power and monetarily incentivized to keep this going. The Russian administration is mobilized to move several 100,000 troops into and around Ukraine. They are obviously amassing troops for an offensive and likely to pursue the weak points in the enemy lines with very high levels of force. Well, after this, hold on. The forthcoming fall of Bakhmut and retreat to weaker lines by Ukraine will put them in a very poor position, just as Russia is bringing far more offensive power to bear. All right, and we now also have what happened here with Belarus, right? So the president of Belarus, and it's another great article that's on CD Media right now, was very, unless, maybe he's just using them as a pretext, but for those of you who only listen, read, and watch Western media, maybe you don't know, but there was this like almost 2-week-long post-year oppression video, movement on behalf of Ukrainian soldiers, and the flat-out torture of people caught on tape while it was like laughed and amusing to Ukrainian soldiers did not go over well in Belarus. And again, maybe they're using that as a pretext, folks, but they really could enter this war on behalf of Russians, fight alongside Russians. And the president said, if you think your actions were cruel, wait till you see what happens when we get our hands on you. Ukraine warns Russia's massing 500,000 troops on border for offensive. If 150,000 Russian troops have already killed 150,000 Ukrainian troops, and with a 3-to-1 kill ratio, then what would a full Russian military deployment look like? How many casualties would 500,000 to 700,000 troops be able to inflict? A similar 3-to-1 kill ratio would be a complete slaughter of Ukrainian forces. Ukraine already has a reservoir of about 1 million men to be called up, and it's already lost probably 1/4 of them through death, surrender, and serious injuries. And actually, I believe it was the BBC that said it really could be as high as 60% of its mobilization capability. They will in late 23 or 24 have to either get massive external support or throw in the towel. Minister, Ukraine may mobilize up to 1 million people against Russia. So the big question is foreign involvement. Russia and Ukraine will continue to bulk up their forces, and Russia is likely to launch a major offensive against Ukraine's weak points in the next month or so. As of now, NATO forces have sent in a smattering of advisors and equipment. Poland sent a few thousand troops, Canada and New Zealand as well. The US and the UK have committed many troops to be advisors and to operate heavy weapon systems, but claim they are not directly fighting. That is a lie. I can tell you right now that's a lie. An advisor is like an ODA, Operation Detachment Alpha, otherwise known as a team of Green Berets. That's what some advisors look like when they say, oh, we're not, it's not boots on the ground, but we are sending combat advisors. An ODA could be, part of that element. And in fact, we knew when this conflict first started about Bragg gearing up and people saying goodbye. So we already knew that that was a lie. Somebody has to show them when they gave them initially stingers or javelins, somebody has to show them how to use those javelins. It is the job of Green Berets to go and make friends with indigenous populations and fight whatever the perceived enemy is, train them how to fight, how to defend themselves, and then fight alongside them. That is the job of a Green Beret. So this idea like, oh, there's no boots on the ground, it's a lie. Anyway, we find that hard to believe at this moment, the claims that there is no direct fighting. But their numbers remain small relative to the number of Ukrainian troops. That I would not doubt. They're very, very small. We will see a large official deployment of troops to the region by the U.S. or NATO, will we? I mean, every elected leader has sworn up and down that it will not happen. But recently, former U.S. General, head of the CIA, and think tank member David Petraeus floated a proposal. U.S. may lead multinational force against Russia and Ukraine. They just can't help themselves. The guts of the article go into a proposal for a multinational U.S.-led force, not NATO, to intervene. That would act as a deterrence and a support force for Ukrainian military. The U.S. has already moved some assets into place in the region to potentially fulfill this plan. It has increased its troop presence in Europe from 800,000 a year to 100,000 troops now, and we know that's done. Right, and I think we're basically at the end. The path near term looks clear. Russia will commit far more forces and continue to inflict massive losses on Ukraine and capture more territory. Will that turn into a peace deal or a full Ukrainian surrender in a year? Or will it turn to a wider war with the U.S. and or full NATO participation? Looking into other aspects of this conflict, as we do in subsequent pieces, should help to clarify that answer. It's just a fantastic article. Really a fantastic article. There's also another one where you can link to, I believe it is right on the front of CD. Hold on one second. But it's on Tsarism. It'll take you to Tsarism about Belarus and what is going on there. Look at that. There it is. Oh, let's do this, shall we? Just published by Jen Snow. Biden promises more military aid to Ukraine during a surprise visit to Kiev. Over the weekend, President Joe Biden departed Joint Base Andrews in Maryland to visit Ramstein Air Base in Germany before going to Kiev for an unannounced visit to the Ukrainian capital on Monday. Meanwhile, like I said, Trump's going to Ohio. Biden went to Ukraine. The visit comes a few days ahead of the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Biden's visit comes amid a race against time as Ukraine's Western allies rush to supply the country with new weaponry, including battle tanks, armored vehicles, and longer-range missiles as Russia prepares for a massive spring offensive. Biden announced $500 million in additional military aid for Ukraine during remarks alongside Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky at Mariinsky Palace in Kiev. The new military aid will include anti-tank missiles, howitzers, ammunition, shells, air surveillance radar, and other support. Advanced weapons were not part of the additional military aid. See, when you get into this, okay, and you're talking about tanks, this is what Joe Kent and I were talking about, where it's like, at some point, if Putin launches a major offensive and they do this kind of support for Ukraine, he's just going to say, NATO, you have declared war on me, whether you did or not. The U.S. is under no obligation to fight for Ukraine. They're not a member of NATO. So Putin will, at some point, be able to legitimately go to the UN and say, the U.S. and their NATO allies have committed acts of war against us. Why do you think they raced to destroy Seymour Hersh? They cannot be seen. He can't be seen as credible anymore. His reporting cannot be believed. Because if so, they have a major problem. And if Russia wins, which is the more likely outcome, they're going to have a much stronger hand to play among the international community. The Western allies will have been exhausted. Their people will have been pissed about the amount of resources that they blew in a failed venture. Another failed venture. Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. I thought it was critical that there not be any doubt, none whatsoever, about the U.S. support for Ukraine in the war. I'm here to show our unwavering support for the nation's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. So then, meanwhile, Zelensky thanked Biden for coming to Kiev at a huge moment for Ukraine. This upcoming presidential election is so important, it's not even funny. Because you have elements on the Republican side, too, that if they were to be the nominee, they would be no different than Biden, maybe even worse. I think Nikki Haley would be even worse. I think Nikki Haley would absolutely order U.S. boots on the ground. I do. She would go to World War III. At least Biden is trying some kind of symmetrical response here, which is always folly. The best and the brightest tried that. They introduced it in the Kennedy administration. It was in counter to the asymmetrical response doctrine from Eisenhower. You look at us the wrong way, we'll just nuke you off the face of the earth. We will hit you with such a massive response. There won't be any Korean War. We're not doing that. We're just going to blow you to an oblivion. It's over. Stone Age type over. And the best and the brightest, the yuppies that they were, thought with their Yale and Harvard, educations, they were smarter than Eisenhower and his Secretary of Defense and Nixon And instead, they did tiny little escalations until it led anyway to a massive buildup in Vietnam and nearly led to a nuclear war over, as they talked about before, the missiles stationed in Cuba. So it's never good. Anyway, the Ukraine president then said that talks would continue between Washington and Kiev about actions on the front lines and, quote, about the people, about Ukrainians, about Americans, what we have to do to stop the war, to have success in this war, and how to win this year, unquote. Zelensky is at a point where his life is on the line now. It's a far cry from Zelensky of last year, who multiple occasions signaled that he was ready to talk. But the West didn't let him. Mainly the US and the UK, actually. They didn't let him. And now he has no choice but to try to convince leadership in the US and the UK to escalate this conflict to the point dangerously close of starting World War III, of ignoring the will of their own people who don't want this. Because it's his survival now. He doesn't care what you want. Zelensky doesn't care what you want anymore. He's trying to survive. He doesn't care what his own people want. The 30% of them who don't even want to be part of Ukraine anymore. At least. It's just so frustrating. It was so avoidable. This never would have happened. It just would never have happened. As 60+% of Americans told Quinnipiac, if Trump was still president, this would not have happened because Trump would not have dealt with this. He would not have blown up Nord Stream 2. It would have been irrelevant. He would have given the Germans cheap gas from the U.S. exports because the U.S. was then energy independent and a major exporter, the likes of which they had not been since FDR. There was another way here. But then again, the Trump family doesn't have personal financial interests in Ukraine. So there's that. It wasn't Trump dating back to 2014 who was going to Kiev and basically extorting them out of money he took out of your pocket. $2 billion. You get the $2 billion if you drop investigations, but also if you put them into these industries, which, by the way, my family is going to take from. Biden added that Putin was dead wrong in believing that Russia could easily take Ukraine during the invasion almost a year ago. I am meeting with President Zelensky and his team for an extended discussion on our support for Ukraine, he said during his comments. Over the last year, the United States has built a coalition of nations from the Atlantic to the Pacific to help defend Ukraine with unprecedented military, economic, and humanitarian support, and that support will endure. Is that right? Because it looks to me that you destroyed the relationship with Germany, which one is the only nation state in NATO. Can we get real for a second? Germany is the only nation state in NATO that actually has the potential, the latent power to become a truly strong, great power. The UK is and has been on the decline for many of long years now. We're going to get Finland. They're going to come to Ukraine and throw snowballs at Putin. He's pushed China and Russia closer together, and he's pushed India away from us. The balance of power over this conflict has dramatically shifted against the United States. I don't know what he's talking about here. Somebody get the guy a change of depends. We will announce additional sanctions against elites and companies that are trying to evade or backfill Russia's war machine. They don't care. Putin took care of them already. 2 2-hour shows on What Are the Odds? Robert Barnes and I, great detail, examine why this is a crock of crap. They are not going to abandon Vladimir Putin. They weren't going to after the other sanctions, and they're not going to with these bogus, worthless sanctions. He already has your number. He doesn't need you and they don't need you. You're going to stop Russia from exporting vodka to Texas? Get out of here. This is ridiculous. So it didn't work the first time. We're going to go for another round? This reminds me of like a 17-year-old boy who can't like please his girlfriend. Let me try again. Honey, one more time, honey. I'll do better this time. With both Russia and Ukraine preparing for spring offensives and the U.S. offering more military aid and support, it indicates that Russia's war in Ukraine is far from over. Biden is expected to visit Poland next week, where he will speak with President Duda and other European leaders. What a friggin' waste. What an absolute and total waste. You know what? I'm going to move on here. We'll get to some of these questions. This is a great question, actually. Why did ballot harvesting doom the GOP in 2022, but not 2021? Part of that's money. And also a part of it is the states themselves. I think that that insinuation's only half right. In fact, it looks like harvesting in Bergen County did, in fact, doom the GOP in New Jersey, in the New Jersey governor's race. But that's a really great point. There also is the matter of Virginia being a little bit of a different exception. Virginia's not like Nevada or Arizona or Pennsylvania with drop boxes and stuff of that nature. So it's a little bit more difficult, which is why you could see somebody like Jennifer Wexton almost lose. I'm not saying they don't harvest in Virginia. I'm just saying it's different. And also it's just the amount of money that was directed toward certain efforts in 2022 was huge, was massive. And it was not something that they could duplicate in 2021. It's, yep. James O'Keefe has been removed from Project Veritas. That's over. That company's over. Nobody I know. I have gotten so many calls from people in media about what's going on with Project Veritas and what happened here. That statement that they wrote up was way worse than not saying anything at all. I don't think anyone's going to cover Project Veritas' stuff anymore. We have, people from, but from like the Epoch Times to Breitbart, they're just going to ignore them now. So I think Project Veritas did itself in. They better hope that people aren't serious, because James O'Keefe, to these people, even certain people at Fox News, he was Project Veritas. He was it. That's it. Certain donors, that's it. So good luck. Good luck. It wasn't like they knew all of these people who James worked with. They knew James. Their relationship was with James. So it's a great point. Yeah, and Garrett, and then you have Turkey, which is a matter of question, but that's a really good point. Poland is stronger than people give them credit for, but Germany could be extremely powerful, but they're not allowed to because of the post-World War II global order. It's like Japan. They're limited. They're not allowed to militarize. This is all very stupid. If you were a real ally of Germany, then you would allow Germany to do whatever it needed to do. You just wouldn't blow up its oil. Like I think the way that Trump had approached NATO would have allowed us to take our hands off the wheels here a little bit and let others stop passing the buck, which is what NATO member nations have done to us. It's called buck passing. It's letting another great power deal with your threats. And that's what's happened here. But Turkey is not on anyone's side, as Garrett follows up with. And they hate Erdogan. There's a lot of people. He is not popular with a lot of these Western people. Yeah. Let me see this one. This is right. That's right. I mean, it's amazing to me that this comment is 100% on the money. It's amazing to me that the very people who Seymour Hersh debunked all those years ago are now the ones who are trying to take out his reputation. The Atlantic, elements in the New York Times, his old employer. These are the people who pushed fake WMD stories, and Seymour Hersh gave the American people the truth, but it was hard to get through when you had everyone beating the drums from the New York Times to Fox News. So it's difficult, and now it's amazing to me that even this is, the deal. Well, that's crazy. Somebody sent me this, and that's from a tweet from like 5 days ago. And it basically shows the Department of Defense, a fact sheet on WMDs, and they're touting their threat reduction efforts with Ukraine and Russia. But in truth, they're acknowledging that Vladimir Putin is right about the biological facilities in Ukraine, because they're touting that it had reduced the activity of these, even though they're admitting to funding at least 46 biological facilities over the past 20 years in Ukraine. So here Putin is saying, and I'll send you guys the DOD fact sheet. Better look at it before they erase it, tell you that. But here, I'm going to send it to you right now. Coming to you, locals. It's right there. It's amazing if these people can lie so brazenly like this. Just like what I was saying about Seymour Hersh. It's just so easy. There you go, Getter. Here comes Rumble. Coming to you. Did I miss anybody? I miss YouTube. YouTube, here it comes. It's incredible to me that they can even have success the way they have before. And in fact, you have people like Wikipedia. Like anyone who has ever gone to college, Wikipedia is not a credible source of information. Yet, I mean, hell, as far as I know, you're not even allowed to use it in primary school, right? I mean, James out. He's out. But in any event, this is the cartel. This is the information part of the cartel. And no matter how many times they get caught lying and pushing fake news, whether it's about WMDs or Russia or whatever, they still have the ability to smear someone the way that Seymour Hersh is being smeared right now. I mean, this was a man who was celebrated for a long time. He was a crucial but minority voice in during the Iraq War period, but then they praised him for it. The New York Times had said, mea culpa. Generally speaking, the paper was wrong. Judith Miller, all these people led us astray. The sources led us astray, but at least we had good people like Seymour Hersh not be led down the fake news rabbit hole. And now somehow they're the authority on whether Seymour Hersh is a conspiracy theorist or not. I mean, you can go to his wiki right now. I'll show you. It says in the first sentence, he's a conspiracy theorist. The very first sentence. Somebody might have removed it, it looks like. Yeah, they removed how they put it. But they still wrote it like this, as follows. All right, so here's Wikipedia. Last week, it said in the very first paragraph that he's known for his conspiracy theories. It looks like somebody has changed it. In the second paragraph, they're adding disputing the claim that Bashar al-Assad's government, rather than Syrian rebel force, had attacked civilians with chemical weapons at Ghouta during the Syrian civil war. And in 2015, he reported that the U.S. and Pakistan had lied about the events surrounding the killing of Osama bin Laden, both times attracting controversy. In 2023, he reported that the U.S. and Norway were responsible for the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline between Russia and Germany, again stirring controversy. In particular, Hersh has been criticized for his heavy reliance on anonymous sources. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to be kidding me. Did the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and all these other, we had a 4-year presidency where the source was never cited. Never. It was always anonymous. And they were always citing each other's anonymous sources. Now, we're going to criticize Seymour Hersh for anonymous source? You're joking, right? First of all, there were whistleblowers in the chemical weapons attack. Both of them that they're referencing. It's to me, it's whether or not the reporter, citing anonymous source or not, has a record of being correct. Right? Right. So whether or not they were right. Seymour Hersh also exposed the CIA domestic spying activities that were illegal and outside their charter. He went on to detail in here the military torture and abuse of prisoners at Abu Ghraib in Iraq when he was writing for the New Yorker. He's the recipient of a record 5 George Polk Awards. I mean, this is, to me, I'm glad they at least got rid of this. You know, that last week it straight said here he's been heavily criticized for his conspiracy theories. That's what it said last week. So somebody changed it now, but I'm just curious of whether let me just see if they had like buried it somewhere else. This is his time at the New York Times. Some of this, I mean, it is worth reading. It's like every time the New York Times was wrong and beat a war drum or pushed a conspiracy theory and Seymour Hersh wasn't on board, Seymour Hersh was right. They were wrong. So, I mean, this is, to me, just incredible. Abu Ghraib, again, left-wing stuff. They loved him. They thought he was a hero for the longest time. Yeah, the Trump Red Line article, I remember that. He said there was a split between the U.S. Intelligence Committee and the president, Donald Trump, over the alleged sarin attack at the rebel town of Khan Sakun in Idlib on April 4th, 2017. Trump issued the order despite having been warned by the U.S. Intelligence Committee that it had found no evidence that the Syrians had used a chemical weapon. I can tell you right now, I know for a fact that it's true. Trump did not believe the U.S. intelligence community. He did. Which, by the way, they thought was great. Mainstream media thought it was great. They took Trump's red line and ran with it, that article. Trump doesn't believe U.S. intelligence sources. Trump believes Russians over the U.S. intelligence sources. You remember that? Trump takes Putin's word over the CIA. Good. The CIA is a bunch of liars. They haven't prevented anything. Another total useless agency. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And by the way, unlike those who are criticizing Hersh's work on the Nord Stream pipeline, public comments from these people make it very, very clear. Like he has them. Here you go.
With regard to Nord Stream 2, we continue to have very strong and clear conversations with our German allies, and I want to be clear with you today. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
One way or another. But we know from the report that actually they were going to do it anyway. They just used that as a pretext to do it. And then you have Biden.
Let me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
And we're supposed to believe that his report's not true? Because why? Hoax pushers are telling us he's a conspiracy theorist? You got to be kidding me. No, thank you. Prove it. Prove it. You have no credibility. Prove it. And I'm not talking about some copy and paste job from the Defense Department or the National Security Council. None of them have any credibility in my eyes. Get lost. No way. Obviously, the report's true. Obviously. All right. With that in mind, thanks to everyone who supports our sponsors. Thanks to our sponsors who support the show. Wednesday, we'll talk about it a little bit more. I just want to point out we do have this election for the Wisconsin Supreme Court that's going to be coming up. It's primary day. We'll be talking about the primary on Wednesday, and then we'll talk about who's going. Maybe we'll even poll it. Maybe we'll try to poll it. I did want to try to build a questionnaire today, but I figured we'll make Wednesday, unless something happens, we'll make Wednesday more about polling, and we'll go over the questionnaire. So far for the nomination poll, we'll be adding only people who are declared or we know through the grapevine. Obviously, it has to be confirmed by multiple people that they are seriously considering running. So no Marco Rubio, no what's some of the other ones we've seen included in the nomination polling for Republicans. Some of it's just ridiculous. We know Donald Trump is running. We know Nikki Haley is running. We know that there are elements who are pushing DeSantis to run and that he is considering it. All right. Like strongly. We know Mike Pence is running. Okay. We know Mike Pompeo plans to get in. All right. So we're at like 5, maybe 6 at this point. That's it. There will be no polling that speculates on, this stuff. I see no point on doing that. It's like troublemaking, it's not real. Right. So we have to gauge support for people that are likely to run, because that's reality. We can't just fabricate what we want to be the case or not want to be the case. That's not, I hate it when pollsters do that. That's not true. We'll probably do head-to-head polling as well with like all of those people. Who does best against what candidates? And it's early. So as of now, who does best against those candidates? We'll be adding 2 of those culture questions that we went on board with. So again, I wanted to spend some actual time going over that questionnaire, and we'll do that Wednesday. Hopefully, we'll be allowed to do that Wednesday. There won't be all this crazy stuff. And then we'll get in the field as soon as we can. All right. We'll also do congressional favorability ratings again. We'll see where McConnell's at. We'll see where Schumer's at. We'll see where Hakeem Jeffries is at. We'll see where Kevin McCarthy is at. What else? And, it won't be huge. We're going to have to keep it to with the culture and with the nomination questions, and then the trackers that we always do. That's a survey. The economic confidence index, Biden's approval, of course, right track, wrong track, stuff of that nature. Dropping most important issues, most important voting issues. We're dropping that for now. We'll start that about a year out from the vote. All right. So we're not there yet. There's no point to track it right now. It's just not. And then we'll do that. We'll try to get one out of the way. And then by the time the next public polling project's up, we'll have our trust in institutions indexes that we'll run again. Everything from the Supreme Court to the FBI to this to that, public health. We do that once a year. And I don't know if we do have the UFO question that comes like in the spring. I really want to make sure that we get to some of the other stuff like greatest enemy. We have to kind of stay on schedule. What's the biggest threat? Greatest enemy to the United States? China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. That's I love those, and that's a must. I love tracking that stuff. And then also, there was one more. That we do an annual. A Civil War question. Marjorie Taylor Greene on President's Day today said, we need a national divorce. We need, before we have a civil war. And that gained obviously a lot of attention. And she said, everyone I talk to says we need to just do this to prevent a civil war. The truth, I know they jump on her and like it's treasonous to suggest we do that. The American people, the last 2 years we've asked this question, have expressed serious concern for a civil war being likely, very likely, in fact, in the future. So people believe that we're in trouble. And we also asked them whether they support a peaceful resolution to it. And unfortunately, there is a great number of people who want it. All right. And that's scary. So I want to make sure we get those questions. And we have to stay that and keep the schedule on time. All right. So again, the public polling project link is always in the video description. And when we're on our way out, I'll pop them in the comments again. Share it far and wide. Let's try to get it funded, the new one funded, and we can get out in the field as quick as possible. All right, so it's in the description. I believe the right one is. Let me just check Rumble and make sure that it in fact is. It would be the same in YouTube. All right, and we do have some money that was going to this project from prior donations. All right, so I don't know why it won't update. I can see post-Labor people. Some people are still giving to the post-Labor Day poll. I did update it. You have to go directly to the Public Polling Project crowdfund link. All right, don't go anywhere else because, unfortunately, there's like $1,800 in the post-Labor Day one overfunded or something, and that has to be moved over. All right, with that in mind, we'll see you on Wednesday. All right, and we'll take a look at the questionnaire and go from there. All right, all the best, folks. Thanks for coming by. Don't forget, if you like the videos, like them, whether on Rumble or YouTube. Subscribe to the People's Pundit channel, whether on Rumble or on YouTube. If you're on Rumble, check out right down there. Locals community. Sign up. Become a member first if you want to. See if it's something you want to become a supporter to. peoplespundit.locals.com. If you are a supporter, don't forget a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. We've been reading Tragedy of Great Power Politics. What was really cool in the last chapter is that he went and responded. John Mearsheimer responds. I don't want to say go after, but he responds to defensive realists like Jack Snyder. And all of this is so very relevant. And we read Jack Snyder before, which was kind of by design. I did that by design. Myths of Empire. And I think one of Snyder's greatest contributions is the myths. Showing, are we a myth-believing society? If so, what are these myths? You just heard Nikki Haley use one. The myth of the domino theory. If we don't stop Putin in Ukraine, Poland will fall next. That is a myth of empire. It isn't true. It isn't realistic. That's not how the world works. And they've been selling this to you, for years, for decades and decades. That's how they got us in the Korean War. That's how they got us in the Vietnam War. In the end, that's actually how they got us in the Iraq War. Part of it. It was an element to the domino theory, the domino theory myth, which is that, Iraq, we had to stop them there. Otherwise, it'll spread. If we don't fight them there, we'll have to fight them at home. It was a version of the domino theory, as was several other myths to help us get stupid decisions in the war on terror. All right. So, yeah, definitely. If you're a locals member, we had a big turnout yesterday for the book club, which was great. So my efforts to really push you guys in to do this. I know it's Sundays. If you miss it, I always upload the recording. I just did actually earlier today. Sometimes it was a little late. It didn't auto submit. I'm going to go check and make sure it auto submitted because the week prior, I noticed when I was getting it ready yesterday, it hadn't auto submitted. So I had to go back in and do it. And then it popped up right before. So if you were trying to see it before that book club, you weren't able to, and you have to retroactively go watch the episode you missed. But if you can't make it on Sunday, definitely try to check it out on the replay. But that's for supporters on locals. It's worth it. It's a lot of great information, and there's no better time. Unfortunately, it never ends. It's just that some periods, this information is more prescient than others. It never ends. It's always recycling the same BS. But now we can see it real time. All right. So, again, yeah, see you Wednesday. I'll let you go. See you Wednesday. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers. And the promo codes are TPP for the People's Pundit. Go check out fieldofgreens.com. Get your 15% off of Field of Greens and Jam and Bean. Both links in description. Use the promo code TPP. Get 10% off your popcorn, your coffee, your teas. All very delicious from Jam and Bean. All right, folks, I'm out. I'll see you Wednesday.
You wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're